Experts explained how long Ukraine can hold territory in the Kursk region. According to estimates by high-ranking American officials, Ukraine will be able to hold the territory claimed by its troops in Russia's Kursk region for at least several months, if not longer. This is reported by Bloomberg. According to officials, Ukraine has so far not faced any serious problems with the delivery of goods to the Kursk region, as Russian forces have only mounted limited counterattacks and instead focused on the offensive in eastern Ukraine. According to officials, the armed forces now also have a more stable supply of artillery ammunition thanks to the efforts of the Allies. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukraine can use the territory as a bargaining chip in negotiations, although it is not clear exactly when negotiations with Moscow might take place, as Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has shown no serious willingness to do so. Ukraine's allies say Zelensky may be preparing to take a more flexible stance as he explores ways to end the war, according to Bloomberg. According to senior U.S. officials, Ukraine is trying to decide how best to protect itself during the winter, and is also starting to plan actions for next year, including at the expense of additional brigades. The operation of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region was justified, although it did not attract significant Russian forces from the east of Ukraine. We will remind you that the victory plan of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, which he presented to U.S. President Joe Biden, provides for the continuation of the operation of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region and the receipt of modern weapons from the West. In the historical context, it is too early to judge the success of the Kursk operation of the defense forces. But there are already certain results, says the interview of President Volodymyr Zelensky. The General Staff of the Armed Forces reported that the enemy is pressing the hardest in the Kharkiv direction. During the past day, October 9, 149 combat clashes took place on the front line. The enemy pressed the most in the Kharkiv direction. This is reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine AFU. Over the past day, aviation, missile forces and artillery of the defense forces have struck 14 strikes on the areas of concentration of personnel and anti-aircraft defenses of the enemy. In addition, the control post, 6 anti-aircraft vehicles and 1 artillery system were hit, writes the General Staff. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians carried out offensive actions in the area of Tychy and Vovchansk 4 times. In the Kupiansk direction, the enemy attacked 17 times in the areas of Kucherivka, Petropavlivka, Stepava Novoselivka, Vaishnovo, Novosinovo, Zeleny Gay, and Kruglyakivka. 18 Russian attacks were stopped in the Lyman direction. The invaders concentrated their efforts in the areas of the settlements of Grakivka, Andriivka, Makivka, Nevsky, Katerinivka and Torsky. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy tried to advance 6 times near Minkivka, Chasevoy Yar, Alexandro Shultany, Vila Hora and Stupochki. On the Teresk direction, the enemy tried to advance 9 times in the Teresk, Nelipivka, Sherbanivka, and Delievka districts. There were 25 attacks in the Pokrovsky direction. The main efforts of the Russians were concentrated in the areas of Selidovoy. In the Kharkiv direction, the enemy tried 31 times to break through the Ukrainian defense lines in the areas of Hernik, Novoselidivka, Kurakivka, Sukurini, Gostroy, Georgievka, Kostyantinivka, Katerinivka, and Antonivka. In the Vremysk direction, 5 attacks were repelled in the area of Bogoyavlenka. In the Dnieper direction, the Russians made 4 futile attempts to capture the positions of our defenders. Since the beginning of the full-scale war, Rus. Soldiers of the armed forces eliminated more than 1,000 invaders and dozens of artillery systems in a day. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine updated the information about the losses of the enemy in the war of aggression against Ukraine. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the defense forces have eliminated more than 665,000 Russian invaders, more than 19.2 thousand artillery systems, more than 17.7 thousand BBM and 8,945 tanks. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in a post on Facebook. The total combat losses of the Russians from 24.02.22 to 10.10.24 approximately amounted to: personnel, about 665,200 plus 1,080 people. Tanks 8,945 plus 1 units. Armored Combat Vehicles 17,765 plus 14 units. Artillery Systems 19,263 plus 41 units. RSZV 1,225 plus 2 units. Air Defense Equipment 976 plus 3 units. Aircraft 369 units. Helicopters 328 units. UAVs of the operational tactical level 16,767 plus 49 units. Cruise missiles 2,619 plus 1 units. Ships, boats 28 units. Submarines 1 unit. Automotive equipment and tank trucks 26,314 plus 74 units. Special equipment 3,386 plus 1 units. The data is being verified. On the morning of October 10, explosions were heard in Kryvyi Rih. The military was warned about drones moving in the direction of the city. 2 people were injured and private residential buildings were destroyed as a result of Russian strikes on Zaporizhia in the morning of October 10. In the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballistic missiles. It is known that at least 5 people died, 9 people were injured. Donetsk OVA reported how many children remain in the shelled Kostiantynivka. As of October 9, 800 people, including 340 children, remain in Kostiantynivka, Donetsk region, under enemy fire. This was announced by the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, Vadim Filishkin. Now, 17,800 people remain in Kostiantynivka, including 340 children. In just 1 month, more than 2,000 people left, the report says. Filishkin reminded that from Monday, October 7, an increased curfew has been announced in the city of Kostiantynivka, which lasts from 3 p.m. to 11 a.m. the next day. Filishkin emphasized that the introduction of such a curfew was for one purpose, to save people's lives. Every day, the enemy bombards the city of Kostiantynivka with guided aerial bombs and ballistic missiles. Unfortunately, a very large number of people suffer from this every day, they die and are injured, stated the head of OVA. On the morning of October 10, explosions were heard in Kryvyi Rih. The military was warned about drones moving in the direction of the city. 2 people were injured and private residential buildings were destroyed as a result of Russian strikes on Zaporizhia in the morning of October 10. In the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballistic missiles. It is known that at least 5 people died, 9 people were injured. The enemy damaged warehouses on the outskirts of Mykolaiv. Yesterday evening, October 9, the Russian invaders shelled the outskirts of Mykolaiv. The warehouses were damaged. This was reported by the Telegram channel of the mayor Alexander Sinkovich. According to Sinkovich, the enemy previously attacked with Kh-59, Kh-69 missiles. As a result of the shelling, a fire broke out, which was promptly extinguished. There is damage to warehouses. Fortunately, there are no victims, he added. On the morning of October 10, explosions were heard in Kryvyi Rih. The military was warned about drones moving in the direction of the city. 2 people were injured and private residential buildings were destroyed as a result of Russian strikes on Zaporizhia in the morning of October 10. In the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballistic missiles. It is known that at least 5 people died, 9 people were injured. Occupants hit Kryvyi Rih in the morning, damaged a high-rise building. A 5-story residential building was damaged as a result of a Russian drone strike in the city of Kryvyi Rih on the morning of October 10. This was announced by the head of Dnepropetrovsk OVA Serhiy Lysyk in Telegram. In the morning, the Russian army attacked Kryvyi Rih BPLA. A damaged 5-story building. We are clarifying the information, the statement said. Later, he reported that the roof of the building was mutilated, and the stairwell was destroyed in one of the entrances. 6 people were rescued from the damaged part of the house, said the head of the OVA. Also, as a result of the attack, a gas pipe was broken in the city, and a fire broke out. On the morning of October 10, explosions were heard in Kryvyi Rih. The military was warned about drones moving in the direction of the city. 2 people were injured and private residential buildings were destroyed as a result of Russian strikes on Zaporizhia in the morning of October 10. In the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballistic missiles. It is known that at least 5 people died, 9 people were injured. A fuel warehouse was destroyed at a military airfield in Russian Adygea. In Russia, on the night of October 10, a fuel warehouse was destroyed at the military airfield, Kanska, near Mykop in Adygea. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Combating Disinformation (CCP), announced this. 410 kilometers from the combat line, near Mykop, a fuel storage facility was destroyed at the airfield, he noted. We will remind that due to a large-scale fire, the authorities of the Russian region decided to evacuate the inhabitants of the nearest village to the burning airfield. A few hours ago, drones attacked the military airfield, Kanska, in the area of the town of Kanska near Mykop in Russian Adygea. On the night of September 18, Ukrainian drones controlled by the SBU, GUR, and SZH struck a large warehouse of the Missile and Artillery Department of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation in the village of Toropets, Tver region. A railway ferry with fuel caught fire in the Russian port of Kavkaz. It was hit by the armed forces and eventually sank. September became a record for the elimination of Russian invaders during the entire war. In September, the Russian army lost an average of 1,271 people killed or seriously wounded every day in the war with Ukraine. So, the first month of autumn 2024 became the deadliest for the Russian army. The Telegraph made its calculations. It is noted that this number exceeded the previous highest level of losses, which was recorded in May. At that time, the Russian army lost an average of 1,262 people killed and wounded every day. In addition, September also marked the 5th month in a row that Russian forces lost more than 1,000 soldiers per day. According to analysts, such a high level of losses is connected with the Russian tactics of massive infantry, that is, meat assaults. At the same time, representatives of British intelligence believe that the Russian offensive, which has been going on for more than a year, will continue in the future, although victories for the Russian army come at a high price. We will remind that since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the defense forces eliminated more than 665,000 Russian invaders, more than 19.2 thousand artillery systems, more than 17.7 thousand BBM and 8,945 tanks. On October 9, the defense forces of Ukraine successfully hit the Shahed UAV storage base near Oktyabrski settlement in the Krasnodar territory. On the night of September 18, Ukrainian drones controlled by the SBU, GUR, and SZH struck a large warehouse of the Missile and Artillery Department of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation in the village of Toropets, Tver region. A railway ferry with fuel caught fire in the Russian port of Kavkaz. It was hit by the armed forces and eventually sank. Video. After the drone attack, the Russian authorities announced a partial evacuation in Adygea. In Adygea, an evacuation was announced in the area of the Kanska airfield, where unknown drones flew at night. OSINT analysts suggest that a fuel depot may be on fire at the airfield. This was reported by Astra Telegram channel. The head of Adygea announced the evacuation. Last night, the suburbs of Mykop were attacked by enemy drones. There were no casualties, no injuries. Representatives of special services and rescuers are on the scene. Firefighters of the Ministry of Emergency Situations extinguish the fire. An organized evacuation of residents of the village of Jarelny is underway. The point of temporary accommodation of citizens is detailed in art. Kansky people will be provided with everything they need. According to Interfax, 40 people were evacuated from the suburbs of Mykop after the drone attack on the Kanska airfield. It is claimed that the site of the fire, which was recorded earlier by NASA's fire monitoring system, could have been a PMM warehouse. According to others, it could have been fuel tanks for aircraft or a warehouse for aerial bombs. We will remind that a few hours ago in the area of Kanska village near Mykop in Russian Adygea, drones attacked the Kanska military airfield. On the night of September 18, Ukrainian drones controlled by the SBU, GUR, and SZH struck a large warehouse of the Missile and Artillery Department of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation in the village of Toropets, Tver region. A railway ferry with fuel caught fire in the Russian port of Kavkaz. It was hit by the armed forces and eventually sank. Air defense forces shot down 41 Shaheds, but could not stop the Iskanders. On the night of October 10, 2024, Russian terrorists attacked Ukraine with attack UAVs and missiles of various types. Our defenders managed to target 41 drones. This was announced by the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on its Telegram channel. In total, the radio engineering troops of the Air Force detected and escorted more than 50 means of air attack of the enemy. 2 inches Iskander-M, ballistic missiles launch area, TOT of Crimea. 1 guided air missile Kh-31P from the airspace of Crimea. 2 guided air missiles Kh-5969 from the airspace of Crimea. 3 S-300 anti-aircraft guided missiles from occupied Donetsk region. 62 strike UAVs launch areas, Primorsko-Akhtarsk, Kursk, Russian Federation. The air attack was repulsed by aviation, anti-aircraft missile forces, electronic warfare units and mobile fire groups of the Air Force and the Defense Forces of Ukraine. As a result of anti-aircraft combat, 41 enemy UAVs were shot down in the Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kherson, Kyiv, Cherkasy, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, Poltava, Zaporizhia and Donetsk regions. 14 enemy drones were lost in location in different regions of Ukraine, presumably as a result of active anti-aircraft missile defense. The information is being clarified. As a result of the Russian strike, civilian objects and objects of critical infrastructure in Odessa, Poltava and Donetsk region were hit by missiles and attack UAVs. As of 11 a.m., combat work continues. Several UAVs presumably attack or in the airspace of Ukraine. There is also a lot of activity of reconnaissance drones in the north and south, the command of the Space Forces reports. We will remind that in Russia, on the night of October 10, a fuel warehouse was destroyed at the military airfield, Kanska, near Mykop in Adygea. In September, the Russian army lost an average of 1,271 people killed or seriously wounded every day in the war with Ukraine. The General Staff confirmed the successful destruction of another airfield in Russia. Defense forces of Ukraine hit Kanskaya airfield in the Republic of Adygea, Russia. This is reported by the General Staff. Tonight, an attack was made on the ammunition warehouse located on the territory of this military facility. In the vicinity of the target, ignition was recorded, as well as the work of enemy air defense. Su-34 and Su-27 aircraft were based at the airfield. Details regarding the impact of the impact are currently being clarified. The operation was carried out by the joint efforts of the Security Service of Ukraine, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. We previously wrote that in Russia, on the night of October 10, a fuel depot was destroyed at the Kanska military airfield near Mykop in Adygea. We will also remind you that in Adygea, an evacuation was announced in the area of the Kanska airfield, where unknown drones flew at night. OSINT analysts suggest that a fuel depot may be on fire at the airfield. Rocket attack on Odessa. The number of victims has increased. The number of people killed as a result of the Russian missile attack on Odessa on October 9 has increased to 8. A 26-year-old man who was injured died in the hospital. This was announced by the head of the Odessa Regional Military Administration, Maxim Kuiper. We previously wrote that on the night of October 9, Russian troops once again attacked the Odessa region with Shahed attack drones. As a result of the shelling, a high-rise building was damaged, and there are wounded among civilians. We will also remind you that on the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballistic missiles. Rashisti hit Kab's Kharkiv district. There are wounded. On October 10, Russian troops carried out an airstrike in the Kharkiv district, as a result of which at least 5 people were injured. Oleg Sinagubov, the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, reported this on Telegram. The occupiers attacked the village of Cherkaska Lozova, Kharkiv district. At this moment, 5 victims have been recorded, he noted in his post. Alexander Hololobov, its leader, also announced the attack on the Molodanyliv community. He clarified that one of the settlements of the community came under shelling, but there is currently no information about the victims. Earlier we wrote that on October 9, the Russian invaders shelled the outskirts of Mykolaiv. The warehouses were damaged. We will also remind you that in Kherson, a bomb exploded next to a shuttle bus at a stop in the Dnipro district. The government named the purpose of Russian shelling of ports and granaries. Recently, Russia has increased its attacks on the port infrastructure of Ukraine, targeting civilian ships and grain warehouses. Oleksiy Kuleba, Minister of Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine, wrote about this in Telegram. According to him, the purpose of Russian attacks on port infrastructure is to reduce Ukraine's export potential. In particular, we are talking about deliberately provoking a food crisis in those parts of the world that directly depend on the supply of Ukrainian grain. The targets of enemy shelling are primarily ports, civilian ships and granaries, Kuleba writes. He said that over the past 3 months, the enemy has carried out almost 60 attacks on the south of Ukraine. They resulted in the damage and destruction of almost 300 port infrastructure facilities, 177 vehicles and 22 civilian vessels. It is also known that 79 civilians were injured, including employees of ports, logistics companies and ship crews. Every war crime is documented by law enforcement officers. And Russia will be responsible for every attack against civilians, humanity and international law, Kuleba noted. We will remind you that in recent days, the enemy attacked foreign ships in Ukrainian ports 3 times. On the night of October 6, a Russian missile damaged the civilian vessel Peresa under the flag of St. Kitts and Nevis, which was carrying 6,000 tons of Ukrainian corn, in the Pivdeni port. It was the 20th civilian vessel to be damaged by Russian attacks. In the evening of October 7, the enemy struck with ballistic missiles, targeting the port infrastructure of Odessa. The Palau-flagged cargo ship ORTIMA was hit. 1 person died, 5 others were injured. Then Kuleba pointed out that Russian terrorists are purposefully trying to disrupt the work of the Ukrainian grain corridor. In the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballast. In Zaporizhia, the number of victims of the Russian attack increased. The number of injured after the October 10 enemy attack on the private sector of Zaporizhia increased to 6 people. Among them are 3 men, 2 women and a 17-year-old girl. According to the State Emergency Service, all victims received medical help on the spot and refused further hospitalization. One of the damaged private houses caught fire. Firefighters extinguished the fire and did everything necessary to prevent reignition. 29 houses were partially destroyed. A total of 45 rescuers and 9 pieces of equipment were involved in the liquidation. It was previously reported that 2 people were injured and private residential buildings were destroyed as a result of Russian strikes on Zaporozhye in the morning of October 10. On the morning of October 10, explosions were heard in Kryvyi Rih. The military was warned about drones moving in the direction of the city. In the evening of October 9, the occupiers struck the Odessa region with ballistic missiles. It is known that at least 5 people died, 9 people were injured.